At an old gas station in one of Los Angeles' outlying neighborhoods, Ozzy Osbourne's black Mercedes came to an unexpected stop, and in that moment, the veil of a 40-year-old secret was about to be lifted. It was October 2018, and miles away from the glitter of Beverly Hills, this was one of those places time had forgotten. As Ozzy looked out the window, the man standing beneath a faded shell sign suddenly rewound time. That face, that posture, those hands. It was impossible, but Ozzy's heart suddenly sank. The man at the pump, wearing a worn blue coverall, was wiping his hands with an oily rag. Sharon looked up and noticed the expression on Ozzy's face. Her husband's eyes had welled up. She had seen Ozzy cry many times throughout their 40-plus years of marriage, but this was different. This wasn't pain. It was shock. Ozzy slowly opened the door and got out of the car. As Sharon tried to understand what was happening, Ozzy walked toward the pump, as if hypnotized. The man looked up and put on a routine smile to greet the customer, but his eyes froze when they saw Ozzy. There was silence for a few seconds, then the man dropped the rag in his hand. Ozzy's voice cracked, and in his Birmingham accent he said a single word. "Tommy." The man stepped back, as if he'd seen a ghost. His hands were trembling. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Ozzy took another step closer and repeated, this time his voice more determined. "Tommy Mitchell, is that you, son?" The man finally answered, his voice broken and weary. "Yeah, it's me, Ozzy. It's me." The two men looked at each other, the distance between them only a few meters, but the weight of the passing years felt like tons. A flood of memories rushed through Ozzy's mind in seconds. When they'd set out from Birmingham to Los Angeles on their first tour in 1973, Tommy was backstage hauling equipment. Guitars, amplifiers, drums, everything. Tommy wasn't just an ordinary roadie, he was Black Sabbath's invisible fifth member. Before a concert in Detroit, Tony Iommi's guitar string had snapped, and Tommy had found and set up a new guitar in 10 minutes, seconds before they went on stage. Ozzy swallowed and tried to smile, but the tears in his eyes made it difficult. He opened his arms and embraced Tommy. Tommy rested his head on Ozzy's shoulder and wept silently. 40 years of accumulated exhaustion, disappointments, and losses poured out in that moment. Ozzy stroked Tommy's back and whispered, "Easy, son, easy. I'm here." Sharon got out of the car and watched the scene silently. She'd heard Ozzy mention his old friends from his youth, but she'd never seen this man. After Ozzy and Tommy separated, Ozzy pulled out his handkerchief, wiped his eyes, and laughed. It was that familiar, distinctive Ozzy laugh. "Bloody hell, Tommy, seeing you. It's like I've seen a ghost, but a good ghost. Why are you here? What happened to you?" Tommy lowered his head, wearing an expression mixed with shame. Tommy began to speak, but every word seemed to weigh heavy. According to what he told, after leaving Black Sabbath in the late 80s, he'd continued working with other bands. He'd opened an equipment company. Business was good for a while. He got married, had 2 kids. But when the economic crisis hit in '95, his company went under. His wife left him, took the kids, and went. Tommy turned to alcohol, then gambling. "Everything slipped through my fingers one by one," he said. Over the years, he lost his friends, his reputation, and his self-respect. Eventually, he started working as a pump attendant at this gas station because nobody else would hire him anymore. "Nobody wants to hire an old roadie, Ozzy," Tommy said, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I'm 56 years old and I have nothing. At night I sleep in an old trailer in a trailer park." As Ozzy listened, his heart was breaking. This man had sweated for him for years, spent his nights making sure Black Sabbath's concerts went perfectly, and now before him stood a man at rock bottom. Ozzy put his hand on Tommy's shoulder and held it firmly. He looked into his eyes, and his voice was determined. "Tommy, look at me. You're my brother. You always were. You saved my life back then. Remember, in Amsterdam at that club when some drunk idiot threw a bottle at me? You stepped in. You used yourself as a shield for me." Tommy raised his head, remembering that moment. Ozzy continued, "Now it's my turn. There's no way I'm leaving you here. Absolutely not. Sharon approached them and gently asked, "Ozzy, who is this?" Ozzy turned and introduced him to Sharon. "Sharon, this is Tommy Mitchell, one of Black Sabbath's oldest roadies, my old brother." Sharon nodded with an understanding expression and extended her hand to Tommy. "Nice to meet you, Tommy." Tommy shyly shook her hand and mumbled, "Nice to meet you too, Mrs. Osbourne." Ozzy immediately intervened and joked, "Not Mrs. Osbourne, mate, just Sharon. Otherwise you'll be calling me Mr. Osbourne at this rate." Everyone laughed, and the tension eased a bit. But Ozzy had a plan in mind, and he was going to put it into action immediately. He turned to Tommy and asked with a serious expression, "Tommy, what are you doing tomorrow morning?" Tommy answered in confusion, "Working here. Why?" Ozzy shook his head. "No, you're not working anymore. Tomorrow morning at 8, you're coming to my house. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm going to make you an offer. If you refuse, believe me, I'll be very upset." Tommy was filled with mixed emotions, hope and fear at the same time. "Ozzy, I don't know. I'm not what I used to be anymore. I'm old, I'm tired." Ozzy cut him off and laughed. "You're old. I'm 70 years old, mate, and I'm still on stage. Being old is not an excuse. I'm expecting you tomorrow morning." Sharon pulled out a business card from her wallet and gave it to Tommy. Their address and phone numbers were written on it. Tommy took the card with trembling hands and looked at it. It had the address of a luxurious neighborhood in Beverly Hills. He raised his head and his eyes were filled with disbelief. "Ozzy, thank you, but I really don't deserve this." Ozzy approached and touched Tommy's face tenderly. "I decide whether you deserve it or not, son. And believe me, you absolutely deserve it. I'm expecting you at 8 tomorrow morning. If you don't come, I'll come here and kidnap you outright." Tommy smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in years. "I'll come, Ozzy, I promise." As Ozzy turned back to the car, he turned to Sharon and whispered, "We're going to save this man, Sharon. I owe him." Sharon held her husband's hand and nodded. "I know, Ozzy. You've always been like this." The next morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, Tommy Mitchell stood at the door of Ozzy's Beverly Hills home. He had a small duffel bag in his hand with his only set of clean clothes inside. He hadn't been able to sleep all night, his mind constantly thinking about yesterday. Maybe this was a dream, and when he woke up he'd be back in that cramped trailer. But when the door opened and he saw Ozzy's smiling face, he realized this was real. Ozzy was wearing an old black t-shirt and sweatpants, holding a coffee cup in his hand. "Bloody hell, Tommy, right on time. Sharon said he definitely won't come, but I trusted you, mate. Come in, breakfast is ready." When Tommy entered, the grandeur of the house shocked him, but Ozzy's warm welcome was filled with sincerity rather than showiness. Sharon was cooking eggs and bacon in the kitchen and greeted Tommy with a smile. At the breakfast table, Ozzy and Tommy talked about the old days. The first American tour in 1973, Tony Iommi's constantly irritable temperament, Geezer Butler's strange eating habits, Bill Ward's crazy drum solos. Every memory came alive. Ozzy put his coffee cup down on the table and became serious. "Tommy, I'm going to ask you something and be honest. Are you still good with music equipment? I mean, do you still know how an amp works?" Tommy nodded. "Ozzy, that knowledge is never forgotten. Even if my hands are old, my mind is still sharp. Why do you ask?" Ozzy leaned back and smiled. "Because in 2 months I'm going on a European tour. 20 concerts, 12 countries. And I need a stage manager, someone old school, someone I can trust." Tommy's eyes widened, his breath caught. Ozzy continued, "The job is yours, Tommy, if you want it. Good salary, travel expenses covered, 5-star hotels, and most importantly, you'll be part of the family again." Tommy's eyes welled up, his hands began to tremble. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For years he'd felt worthless, a man pushed to the margins of society, forgotten. And now Ozzy Osbourne, the rock and roll legend, was offering him a second chance. Not just a job, but belonging. Tommy tried to untie the knot in his throat and whispered, "Ozzy, I don't deserve this. I'll disappoint you. I'm not as fast as I used to be, not as strong." Ozzy leaned forward and banged on the table, his voice playful but determined. "Tommy, let me tell you something, mate. I once bit the head off a bat, pissed on stage, nearly hurt Sharon when I was drunk. When you think about it, I didn't deserve anyone, but Sharon gave me a chance. Now I'm giving you one. Will you accept it, or are you going to sit here and cry?" Tommy laughed through his tears. He raised his head and looked into Ozzy's eyes. "I accept, Ozzy. I accept, and I promise I won't let you down." Ozzy stood up and hugged Tommy, slapping his back hard. "That's the spirit." "That's my Tommy." Sharon also came over and added, "Tommy, this is your home now. You can come whenever you want, and before the tour starts, we'll find you a proper place. No more living in a trailer." Tommy felt, for the first time in his life, that he belonged to a real family. After 40 years, he belonged somewhere again, and that feeling was more valuable than anything. The following weeks were weeks of transformation for Tommy. Ozzy introduced him to the tour crew. The young roadies were amazed by Tommy's experience. Stage technology had changed over the years. Now there were digital screens, LED lights, computer-controlled systems. But the basic principle was the same, making the artist's sound come out perfectly. Tommy quickly learned the new technologies and shared his old wisdom with the young ones. One evening, during rehearsal, there was a feedback problem with Ozzy's microphone. While the young technicians were searching for a solution, Tommy quietly picked up the microphone, checked the cable, found a small connection point, and fixed it in 2 minutes. Ozzy shouted from the stage, "This is why I brought Tommy back." Old school knowledge. The crew applauded Tommy. Tommy remembered a feeling he'd forgotten for years, the feeling of being valued. The first concert of the European tour was in London, at the O2 Arena. A crowd of 20,000 was waiting for Ozzy. Backstage, Tommy was checking everything. Guitars tuned, drums adjusted, lights synchronized, sound system tested. Everything was perfect. When Ozzy came out of the dressing room, he looked at Tommy for the final check before going on stage. Tommy nodded. "You're ready, Ozzy. You can go on." Ozzy smiled and whispered, "Come with me, Tommy. Get on stage." Tommy was surprised. "What?" "Ozzy, I'm stage crew. I don't go on stage." Ozzy grabbed his arm. "Today you will. This concert isn't just my comeback, it's yours too. Come with me." Tommy's heart was racing, but he couldn't refuse Ozzy. He stood at the edge of the stage. When the spotlights hit his face, he heard the roar of 20,000 people. The concert was magnificent. As Ozzy sang Iron Man, Tommy stood at the edge of the stage, watching through tears. At the end of the concert, Ozzy took the microphone and called out to the crowd, "London, tonight I want to thank someone special. Tommy Mitchell, come here." Tommy was shocked. Ozzy was calling him to center stage. He moved forward slowly, his legs trembling. Ozzy threw his arm around Tommy's shoulder and continued. "This man was one of Black Sabbath's roadies 40 years ago. He was my brother. Life was hard on him, but he didn't give up. And now he's here, with us again." A big round of applause for Tommy. 20,000 people stood up and applauded. Tommy, in that moment, was experiencing the most meaningful moment of his life. Throughout the tour, Tommy wasn't just an employee. He became part of Ozzy's family. Sharon rented him a new apartment, furnished it, even helped him get in touch with his ex-wife and reconnect with his children. Tommy's son and daughter were amazed when they spoke to their father after all those years, especially his son, who couldn't believe his father was working with Ozzy Osbourne. Tommy asked Ozzy one day, "Why, Ozzy? Why are you helping me so much?" Ozzy's answer was simple. "Because you were there for me once, Tommy. And I never forgot you. Maybe the world forgot, but I didn't." Tommy rested his head on Ozzy's shoulder and cried, "I'm grateful to you, Ozzy. You gave me my life back." The final concert of the tour was 6 months later in Birmingham at Genting Arena, in Ozzy's hometown, a homecoming concert. Tommy was no longer just the stage manager, he'd become the leader of the crew. The young roadies called him Brother Tommy and learned from him. When the concert ended, Ozzy called Tommy to the stage again. This time Tommy walked confidently, his head held high. Ozzy spoke into the microphone. "Birmingham, we've had an incredible journey throughout this tour, but the best part of it all was finding my old friend Tommy again." Tommy took the microphone and spoke to the crowd for the first time, his voice trembling but determined. I'm just a roadie. But this man, Ozzy Osbourne, gave me a second chance. He found me in the darkest period of my life. If this story teaches you anything, it's this. Never give up. And true friends, they never forget you. After the concert, while celebrations were happening backstage, Ozzy and Tommy sat quietly in a corner. They clinked their beer bottles. Ozzy laughed. Tommy, you added so much to my life. But now I think I've added to yours, too. Tommy nodded. You did, Ozzy. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me life. You gave me value. And most importantly, you helped me find myself again. The two looked at each other silently. Words were unnecessary. 40 years of friendship had been rekindled at a gas station and was now stronger. Ozzy murmured as he sipped his beer. You know, Tommy, life is strange. Sometimes you lose, sometimes you win, but real wealth is in the people beside you, and you were always beside me. You still are. 2 years passed. Tommy was now Ozzy's permanent stage manager. His relationship with his children had been repaired. He even had a grandchild. One day, he gave his grandchild a small electric guitar as a gift and taught him his first chord. His grandchild asked, "Grandpa, were you famous?" Tommy smiled. "No, sweetheart, I was never famous. But I was beside a famous man. And he gave me the greatest gift of my life, a chance to start over." That night, when Tommy lay down in his bed, he stared at the ceiling. The gas station came to his mind. What would have happened if Ozzy hadn't stopped there that day? Maybe he'd still be in that trailer park now, alone and forgotten. But fate had been written differently. And he had learned this. When life gives you a second chance, you must embrace it with both hands. Finally, one night, while giving an interview on a talk show, the host asked Ozzy, "Ozzy, what was your most unforgettable moment from your tour?" Ozzy thought, smiled, and answered, "My most unforgettable moment was finding an old friend again. Tommy Mitchell. He's my real hero, because he taught me what loyalty and brotherhood mean, and I taught him that it's never too late." The host asked curiously, "What are the details of this story?" Ozzy nodded. "It's a long story, mate. But the short version is this. I found him at a gas station. Life had been cruel to him, but we took him back. Because family isn't bound by blood, it's bound by heart." The studio applauded, and that night Tommy sat in front of the screen, watching through tears. He was living the best period of his life.